Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hain Educations, where we share the knowledge of biology. In today's video, I will be sharing the another important concept while studying biology, and I always remind my student that these concepts will be very useful throughout the learning biology journey, which is the movement of material and substances in and out of the cells. Yes, this is what it is. And enter the movement, so we can subdivide it into two main type of transport. One will be passive transport, which is without using energy. Another one is active transport, meaning that with using transport using energy. Under the passive transport, there are three different types of transporting methods. So diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. For this level or for international GCSE biology level, we will be only focusing on three different types of transport, which are diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. So let's get begin. So this is just an intro telling that there are three main ways that molecules and ions can move through the membrane: diffusion, active transport, and osmosis. So as you can see from this example, so there is a cell and we can see the molecules moving in and out of the cells, passing through the cell membrane. So as you can see from the diagram, there is a higher concentration of carbon dioxide molecules inside the cells than the outside. So you can see the bigger arrow moving out of the cell. So meaning that it's moving from high concentration to low concentration. So the first concept is about diffusion. So it is like a diffuse. So the smell of coffee, the smell of perfume diffuse throughout the room, something like that. So diffusion, many substances can pass through the membrane by diffusion, and it's happened when a substance is more concentrated in one place than the another. And throughout this concept, we will be applying the words concentration gradient, which simply mean the difference in concentration. So from the previous example, you can see a concentration gradient where the concentration of carbon dioxide molecule is higher inside than the outside. So then there is a concentration gradient. So in terms of definition, diffusion is the net movement of molecules or particles from a region of higher concentration to a region of low concentration, which is down a concentration gradient. And we can also add it is due to the random movement. So in a simple way that the molecules or the particles, they are moving from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration down a concentration gradient. So I can give you a scenario. Imagine in a room that I made a cup of coffee, and then the smell of the coffee particle, it's higher concentrated near my area. And those small particles, they were diffused throughout the whole room, and the whole room smell like a coffee, and the students can smell the coffee, right? So this is one example of diffusion. And another easy example would be when we use a perfume, right? So when we have spray a perfume, so there will be a high concentration near our body, and then the smell of perfume will diffuse throughout the rooms, and everyone near me can smell the perfume. So that would be the in real practice example of diffusion. So one more time, diffusion is the movement of particles, which can be molecules or ions, from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration down a concentration gradient. And for the diffusion, there are four factors, or like there can be a factor that can affect the rate of diffusion. Whether the rate of diffusion will be slow or the fast can be depend on this various factor, which are the concentration gradient, surface area to volume ratio, or sometimes we mention that as the particle size, and the distance, and lastly, the temperature. So we can see from the explanation for the concentration gradient, when we have a steeper concentration gradient. So for the concentration gradient, diffusion happens more quickly when there is a steep concentration gradient. So meaning that The example of coffee or perfume, right? We can see that when there is a big difference in concentration, the rate of diffusion is faster and it's happened more quickly than when there is a concentration gradient of similar. So let's go back to our example of coffee, right? So in a room, when there is no smell of coffee, and I come into the room with a holding a cup of coffee, then suddenly all the students they can get a smell of coffee. But if I bring the same cup of coffee into a cafe, n- only a few of them maybe notice, or none of them will notice, right? Because in a cafe, it is a full of coffee smell. So that would be the example of concentration gradient. Next one is surface area to volume ratio. So in biology, whenever we talk about this, this is also another concept, surface area to volume ratio. As smaller the organisms, the larger the surface area to volume ratio. So in other words, we can, in real practice, it can be applied as a particle size. So imagine, right, when you add a sugar to your coffee. So if the size of a particle, or if the size of the sugar is a bit larger, it takes time to fully dissolve, or we have to stir for a while for the sugar molecules to dissolve. But if we add a powder like sugar, like so in these days, like you can find a sugar which are very fine powder like, so those they can dissolve very easily, right? So that is the example of surface area to volume ratio. So when there is a larger surface area to volume ratio, the rate of diffusion will faster. And of course, the distance. So the distance is very obvious. So the rate is decreased if the distance over which diffusion have to take place is greater. Meaning that if okay, I'm giving a lot of coffee example because I like coffee, right? So if I'm drinking a cup of coffee here, and if someone come near to me, of course they will get the smell of the coffee, right? But if they are in the next room, or if they are very far away from me, they will not get the smell of coffee because the distance is very large, or we have a greater distance. So the rate of diffusion will be slow, or it will decrease. And lastly is the temperature. So temperature, of course, right? The rate of diffusion will be greater at higher temperature, because at higher temperature, the particles gain more kinetic energy, so they move faster or they vibrate faster. So it will increase the rate of diffusion. So this would be the concept and the summary slide, where you can see the factor that affect the rate of diffusion, which includes temperature, concentration gradient, surface area to volume ratio, and the distance. And this is the example showing you all about the surface area to volume ratio with a mouse and an elephant. And again, this is the mathematical calculation where we can calculate the surface area to volume ratio. So let's example. So we have a cube. We have a side of 3 centimeter. So let me draw a cube. So this is a cube which we have the let's say 1 centimeter. So this is a cube where we have a 1 centimeter. And then we can show you about how to calculate surface area to volume ratio. So for the surface area, so it have 6 sides. So we multiply 6. And each side, they have 1 into 1. So this would make you 6 centimeters square, right? For the volume is you multiply 1 into 1 into 1, which will give 1. Therefore, when we want to calculate surface area to volume ratio, it will be 6:1. But if we have a larger size molecules, let's say 2 centimeter, then the ratio will be 3:1, right? So as you can see from the example provided here, so when the molecules, or when the particle gets smaller, they have a larger surface area to volume ratio, which would further increase the rate of diffusion. Moving on to another concept, which is the active transport. This is very pretty similar to the diffusion, but this is sometimes the opposite round. So sometimes a cells need to take in substance when there is a layer of the substance outside of the cells, which is the against the concentration gradient. So in terms of definition, active transport is the movement of substances against a concentration gradient using energy from respiration. Against a concentration gradient, meaning that it's a movement of molecules or the particles from low to high concentration. In this case, not from high to low concentration, it is low to high concentration. So against a concentration gradient, using energy in the form of ATP, right? So ATP from respiration, and it's also using carrier protein. So in the cell membrane, there are carrier protein available, and those molecules, they will use ATP as a form of energy, and they were used to transport the substances from low to high concentration. So during active transport, cells use energy from respiration to take a substance, rather like a pump use energy to move a liquid, right? So those can be the large molecules, it can be carrier molecules, gated channels and everything. So the pumps are large protein molecules located in the cell membrane, and they are driven by the breakdown of ATP. The example we can see is like where the small intestine absorb glucose, and also about the root hair cell absorbing the certain mineral ions when there is a low concentration outside of the cells and they stay needed. So as an example, right? So for the roots, outside of the roots, there may be a low concentration of some mineral, let's say nitrate, but for the plants, nitrate ions are essential. So they may take it up using the active transport method from low to high concentration, moving inside the cell. So this could be the another example of active transport. And this is the diagram illustration showing you about the carrier proteins where they use the energy or where they used ATP to move the substance from low concentration to high concentration. So this is the example of active transport. And again, showing about the carrier proteins and everything that are embedded in the cell membrane. And lastly is about osmosis. So diffusion, active transport, they are pretty similar, but diffusion is from high to low concentration. Active transport is from low to high concentration. For the osmosis, again, it is a special sort of diffusion. So one thing that I want you to remind is that whenever we talk about osmosis, it's referring only to the movement of water. So for the movement of water, you have to automatically remember about osmosis. We never mention about diffusion when we talk about the movement of water. So movement of water is a special sort of diffusion, which is the osmosis. So again, osmosis is the net movement of water molecules from dilute solution to more concentrated solution across the partially permeable cell membrane. The dilute solution mean higher water potential. So again, this is pretty similar to diffusion because it's the movement of high concentration to low concentration. But here we use the terms higher water potential to lower water potential, or we can say dilute solution to concentrated solution. So concentrated mean lower water potential. So this is similar to diffusion, but remember, we only use the term osmosis for the movement of water molecules only. So the water move when there is a higher concentration of water molecules to a lower concentration of water molecules, which is down the concentration gradient across the partially permeable cell membrane. Osmosis can only happen if the membrane is permeable. So you need to remember that for the osmosis to take place, the cell membrane or the membrane that water is passing have to be partially permeable. And osmosis is really important for the moving water from cells to cells, especially in the plant roots and the plant. So this is another illustration showing you about the partially permeable membrane where we have the specific sites holes and which only allow a specific molecules to pass through, right? So in this diagram, you can see that this is a solution of sugar solution, let's say, right? We can see this is the sugar solution, and they illustrated you the sites of the sugar molecules and the water molecules. And due to the specific sites holes or like specific pores present in the partially permeable membrane, it's only allowed a specific or like certain molecule site. So in this case, they allow water molecules to go past through the partially permeable membrane, but not the sugar molecule. So in this case, water, they are moving from the left side to the right side. So in the on the right side, on the left hand side, there is a higher water potential than the right hand side. So water molecules, they move from left hand side to the right hand side across the partially permeable membrane. And there is also another thing that we need to cover when we study about osmosis is the several different terms. So imagine we have three different solution, which is hypertonic, isotonic, and hypotonic. Hypertonic mean is a concentrated solution. Hypotonic mean is a dilute solution, and isotonic mean it have a similar concentration to whatever cells that we placed into. So in this case, we are using red blood cell as an animal cells example. So for the hypotonic solution, it's me. Okay, I will just illustrate it as a here. This is an animal cells, and outside there is high concentration. High concentration, or we can say lower water potential. Lower water potential than the cells. So as according to the osmosis theory, water will move from higher water potential to lower water potential. Therefore, the H2O, they will move out of the cells, right? They will move out of the cells. Okay, so what will happen is that there is a higher water potential inside the cells than the outside of the cells. So water, they moved out of the cells by osmosis. So you can imagine, right? From the cells, water are moving out of the cell. So later on, what would happen is the red blood cell become shrink, right? So it will become shrink, and we can say that as a flaccid. So this is when we put animal cells into a concentrated solution. For the isotonic solution, so it means they have a similar concentration. So there is no net movement of water in and out of the cells, and it can maintain the shape of the cells. For the hypotonic solution, it means when there is a higher water potential outside of the cell. So there will be a higher water potential outside of the cell. So in this case, water, they will they will enter the cells. So as you can imagine, right? So when the large quantity of water flowing inside the red blood cell or into the animal cells, first, what will happen? The cells will swells up. So the cells, animal cells or the red blood cells, they swells up. But you have to remember about the cell structure. So animal cells, due to the lack of cell wall, they cannot maintain the target pressure or they cannot maintain the pressure inside. And what would happen is like they will bust out, right? So red blood cells, red blood cell bust out. So it will destroy the shape of the red blood cell as well. So in summary, for the animal cells, when we put into a, let's say, distilled water or hypotonic solution, there is a higher water potential outside of the cells than the inside. So the water enters the cells by osmosis and the cells become swells up. Over the time, due to the lack of cell wall, the red blood cell or the animal cells, they cannot maintain the shape and they cannot withstand the target pressure. So what will happen is they will bust out. So red blood cell or the animal cells will bust out. But when we put into a concentrated solution, so there is a higher water potential inside the cells than the outside. So water move out of the cells by osmosis. So over the time, the cells become shrink, and it is known as the flaccid. Oh, I forgot the term that we use when the cells become swells up, and it's also known as turgid. So it will be like, it will get larger, swells up, and it is known as the turgid. So you need to be familiar with the terms turgid and flaccid, and also busting, shrink, and everything. So turgid means when the cells enter the cells and it get swells up, and when the water move out of the cells and it's become shrink, and then that is known as flaccid. So this is the example for animal cells. But there will be another scenario when we talk about the plant cell, right? Because plant cell has cell wall. So it would be the same scenario for the isotonic solution because they may have a similar concentration. But when we put into distilled water, they will not bust out. They still have swells up. They will still be turgid, but they will not bust out because they have a cell wall which can maintain the turgor pressure. But when we put into very concentrated solution, water will move out of the cells by osmosis, and over the time, the water keep moving out of the cells, and cells become flaccid, or cells will like shrink, right? But over the time, and if the solution is very concentrated, the cell membrane fall apart from the cell wall, and that is known as plasmolysis, right? So as you can see from the slide given here, is the term plasmolysis. So in total, turgid, flaccid, and plasmolyte. So when we put into different type of solution, first thing you need to consider where is the water potential is high or low. So you need to start off with the sentence informing us that there is the higher concentration of higher water potential inside the cells or outside the cell. Depending on that scenario, you need to explain that water move inside the cells or water move out of the cells. And then you have to tell us whether the cells will shrink or it will become swelled up or turgid or flaccid or plasmolized or burst open, depending on whether they are animal cells or plant cells. So usually in the exam, they will ask with the red blood cells and they use potato cells. So this would be the end of the video about explaining the diffusion, active transport, and the osmosis. So these are the key facts or the summary of diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. So my suggestions to study about these concepts is like you make sure you understand this three concept carefully, because I can guarantee that you will encounter this three concept again and again in the future videos and also future lessons in every part of the biology, right? So again, diffusion, osmosis, active transport. Overall, it's about active transport and passive transport. And as usual, I have three different multiple choice practice, and hope you get the correct answer, or you can comment in my video to further discuss or to check whether you get the correct answer or not. So for this part, you need to choose the correct graph, which represent the effect of increasing temperature on the rate of diffusion. So this is, if you forget already, you can go back, go review my video, right? So there is a four factor that can affect the rate of diffusion. And another thing is about that we lastly discussed about it. So when we submerge a solution into a solution, when we submerge a plant cell into a solution P for 20 minutes and they show you a diagram. So you need to choose what happens. So whether the cell is plasmolyzed or enter a high turgor pressure or low turgor pressure, and they ask you to choose whether the solution is high or low inside or outside. Again, I hope you get a correct answer. And for number three, this is very simple. So which process depends on active transport? So active transport is the movement of substance from low concentration to high concentration against a concentration gradient using energy from respiration as well as using the carrier proteins. And lastly, this is another good exercise that hope you help whether you understand the concept really well or not. So this you have to use tick and cross to answer this question. So active transport, osmosis, and diffusion, and they give you some features, and then you need to, whether if it is correct, then you have to put a tick, and if it is not, you have to cross. So that's all for today's video, and this is all about the three different types of movement: diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. And thank you so much for watching my video. And if you have any questions, you can contact me through my email or my through my Instagram account. And hope you learn something new and hope you learn a new concept of biology. And hope to see you all again in future video. And have a great day and enjoy your wonderful day. Bye bye all.